Hello, T1. Today's the day I've been waiting for. Today's the day we are going to finish reading Ramona. And it's a little sad because I hate when I finish a good book, but I have an awesome book that I'm going to start tomorrow. So I hope you guys are excited. Last chapter, you guys ready? It is called Kindergarten Dropout. Now, dropout means like you give up or you're not going to do it anymore. All right. Chapter 8. Why Ramon? Oh, if you guys remember, her tooth is left at school and her teacher got mad at her. You guys remember? Okay. Why Ramona? Whatever is the matter? Mrs. Quimby wanted to know when Ramona opened the back door. Oh, nothing. Ramona had no trouble hiding the gap in her teeth. She did not feel like smiling, and not having a tooth to leave for the tooth fairy was only a small part of her trouble. Mrs. Quimby laid her hand on Ramona's forehead. Are you feeling all right? She asked. Yes, I feel all right, answered Ramona, meaning that she did not have a broken leg or a skinned knee or sore throat. Then something must be wrong, insisted Mrs. Quimby. I can tell by your face. Ramona sighed. Miss Binny doesn't like me anymore, she confessed. Of course Miss Binny likes you, said Mrs. Quimby. She may not like some of the things you do, but she likes you. No, she doesn't, contradicted Ramona. She doesn't want me there anymore. Ramona felt sad thinking about the recesses and the new seat work she was going to miss. Why? What do you mean? Mrs. Quimby was puzzled. Of course Miss Binny wants you there. No, she doesn't, insisted Ramona. She told me not to come back. But why? She doesn't like me, was Ramona's answer. Mrs. Quimby was exasperated. Then something must have happened. There is only one thing to do, and that is to go to school and find out. Eat your lunch, and we'll go to school before afternoon kindergarten starts, and we will see what this is all about. After Ramona had picked at her sandwich a while, Mrs. Quimby said briskly, Put on your sweater, Ramona, and come along. No, said Ramona. I'm not going. Oh, yes, you are, young lady, said her mother, and she took her daughter by the hand. Ramona knew she had no choice when her mother started calling her young lady. She dragged her feet as much as she could on the way to school, where the afternoon kindergarten was behaving just like the morning kindergarten. Half the class was lined up by the door waiting for Miss Binny, while the other half raced around the playground. Ramona stared at the ground because she did not want anyone to see her. And when Miss Binny arrived, Mrs. Quimby asked to talk to her for a moment. Ramona did not look up. Her mother led her to the bench beside the kindergarten door. You sit there and don't budge while I have a little talk with Miss Binny, she told Ramona. Ramona sat on the bench, swinging her feet, thinking about her tooth in Miss Binny's drawer and wondering what her teacher and her mother were saying about her. Finally, she could no longer stand the suspense. She had to budge, so she slipped over to the door as close as she could without being seen and listened. The afternoon kindergarten and the workmen across the street were making so much noise. She could only catch a few phrases such as bright, imaginative, ability to get along with her friends, and a negative desire for attention. Ramona felt awed and frightened to be discussed in such strange big words, which must mean Miss Binny thought she was very bad indeed. She scuttled back to the bench when at last she heard her mother walk to the door. What did she say? Ramona's curiosity was almost more than she could endure. Miss Quimby looked stern. She said she'd be glad to have you back when you are ready to come back. Then I'm not going back, announced Ramona. She would never go back to kindergarten at all if her teacher didn't like her. Never. Oh, yes, you are, said Miss Quimby. Ramona knew better. Thus began a difficult time in the Quimby household. But Ramona, you have to go to kindergarten, protested Beezus when she came home from school that afternoon. Everyone goes to kindergarten. I don't, said Ramona. I used to, but I don't now. When Mr. Quimby came home from work, Mrs. Quimby took him aside and talked quietly to him. Ramona was not fooled for a minute. She knew exactly what they were whispering about. "Well, Ramona, suppose you tell me all about what happened at school today," said Mr. Quimby with the false cheerfulness grown-ups use when they are trying to persuade children to tell them something that they don't want to. Ramona, who had longed to run to her father and show him where her tooth used to be, thought a while before she said, "We guessed what Miss Binny had in a paper bag that began with a T, and Davy guessed caterpillars." "And what else happened?" asked Mr. Quimby, all set to be patient. Ramona could not tell her father about her tooth, and she was not going to tell him about pulling Susan's curls. Nothing much was left to talk about. "We learned T," she said at last. Mr. Quimby gave his daughter a long look, but said nothing. After dinner, Beezus talked to Mary Jane on the telephone, and Ramona heard her say, "Guess what? Ramona is a kindergarten dropout." She seemed to think this remark was very funny because she giggled into the telephone. Ramona was not amused. Later, Beezus settled down to read a book while Ramona got out her crayons and some paper. "Beezus, you don't have very good light for reading," said Mrs. Quimby, and she added, as she always did, "You only have one pair of eyes, you know." Here was her opportunity for Ramona to show off her new kindergarten knowledge. "Why don't you turn on the Donzer?" she said proudly of her new word. Remember Donzerly light? She thinks a Donzer is light. Beezus looked up from her book. "What are you talking about?" she asked Ramona. "What is a Donzer?" Ramona was scornful. "Silly, everyone knows what a Donzer is." "I don't," said Mr. Quimby, who had been reading the evening paper. "What is a Donzer?" "A lamp," said Ramona. "It gives a light. We sing about it every morning in kindergarten." A puzzled silence fell over the room until Beezus suddenly shouted with laughter. "Ah!" she gasped. "The Star-Spangled Banner?" She laughed, dwindled to giggles. "She means the dawn's early light." She pronounced each word with exaggerated distinction, and then she began to laugh again. Ramona looked at her mother and her father, who had their straight mouths but laughing eyes of grown-ups who were trying not to laugh out loud. Beezus was right, and Ramona was wrong. She was nothing but a girl who used to go to kindergarten who got everything wrong and made everyone laugh. She was a stupid little girl, a dumb, stupid little sister who never did anything right. Suddenly, everything that had happened that day was just too much for Ramona. She glared at her sister, made a big crisscross motion in the air with her hands, and shouted, "Cross out Beezus!" Then she threw her crayons on the floor, stomped her feet, burst into tears, and ran into the room she shared with her sister. "Ramona Quimby," her father said sternly, and Ramona knew that she was about to be ordered back to pick up her crayons. Well, her father could order her all he wanted to. She was not going to pick up her crayons. Nobody could make her pick up her crayons. Nobody. Not her father, not her mother, not even the principal. Oh, poor Ramona. "Now, never mind," Ramona heard her mother say. "Poor little girl, she's upset. She's had a difficult day." Sympathy made things worse. "I am not upset," yelled Ramona, and yelling made her feel so much better. She continued, "I am not upset, and I am not a little girl, and everybody is mean to laugh at me." She threw herself on her bed and pounded her feet on the bedspread. But pounding on the bed was not enough. Far from it. Ramona wanted to be wicked, really wicked. So she swung around and beat her feet on the wall. Bang, bang, bang. That noise ought to make everyone good and mad. "Mean, mean, mean," she yelled in the time of her drumming feet. She wanted to make her whole family feel as angry as she felt. "Mean, mean, mean," she yelled. She was glad her feet were leaving marks on the wallpaper. Glad, glad, glad. Mother, Ramona's kicking the wall, said Tattletale Beezus, as if her mother did not know what Ramona was doing. It's my wall, too. Ramona did not care for Beezus tattled. She wanted her to tattle. Ramona wanted the world to know she was so bad she kicked the wall and left marks on the wallpaper. Ramona, if you're going to do that, you'd better take your shoes off. Mrs. Quimby's voice from the living room was tired but calm. Ramona kicked harder to show everyone how bad she was. She could not take off her shoes. She was a terrible, wicked girl. Being such a bad, terrible, horrible, wicked girl made her feel good. She brought both feet against the wall at the same time. Thud, thud, thud. She was not the least bit sorry for what she was doing. She would never be sorry. Never, never, never. Ramona, Mr. Quimby's voice held a warning note. Do you want me to come in there? Ramona paused and considered. Did she want her father to come in? No, she did not. Her father, her mother, nobody could understand how hard it was to be a little sister. She drummed her feet a few more times to prove that their spirit was not broken. Then she lay on her bed and thought wild, fierce thoughts until her mother came in and silently helped her get undressed and into bed. When the light had been turned off, Ramona felt so limp and tired, and she soon fell asleep. After all, she had no reason to try to stay awake because the Tooth Fairy was not going to come to her house that night. The next morning, Mrs. Quimby walked into the girls' room and briskly said to Ramona, "Which dress would you like to wear to school today?" The empty space in her mouth and the footprints on the wall above her bed reminded Ramona of all that had happened the day before. "I'm not going to school," she said, and reached for her play clothes, while Beezus put on a fresh school dress. A terrible day had begun. No one said much at breakfast. Howie, who had recovered from his cold, stopped for Ramona on his way to school and then went on without her. Ramona watched all the children in the neighborhood go to school, and when the street was quiet, she turned on the television set. Her mother turned it off. Little girls who don't go to school don't get to watch television. Ramona felt that her mother did not understand. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to go to school more than anything in the world, but she could not go back to a teacher who didn't like her. Ramona got out her crayons and paper, which somebody had put away from her, and she settled down to draw. She drew a bird, a cat, and a ball in a row, and then with her red crayon, she crossed out the cat, because it did not begin with the same sound as the bird and the ball. Afterwards, she covered a whole sheet of paper with cues, Ramona style, with ears and whiskers. You guys, I think I'm going to break this chapter into 2 parts, so that way it's not such a long video. So I'm going to stop it here, and I'll record the other one, okay?